Hi, everybody.
Hello, I'm Ryan.
I'm Bethany.
And we are Ryan and Bethany Board Game Reviews.
And today we'll be talking about Talisman, Harry Potter. And this is published by The Op.
All right, you guys, if you have played the original game of Talisman, this is very, very similar. This has been rethemed as the Harry Potter world. All right, so you're going to see a lot of information, a lot of different locations that you're familiar with in the wizarding world and in the Harry Potter universe. Basically, what's going to happen is we are going to move around the board. We're going to try to ultimately defeat Voldemort. So let me show you how to play. All right, here's our setup for Talisman Harry Potter. All right, so every player is going to get one of these character cards. And on it is going to be all the different stats that your character has, as well as all the different actions and special abilities they have. So, you're also going to get a dial like this. That's going to show your magic, your might, and your life. You're going to turn these to make it match what your character has. So Hagrid has 2 magic, he's got 5 might, and he starts the game with 4 life. So we're going to turn all these dials to make it match that, and then we're ready to go. We also have 2 currencies in the game. We have these galleons, and then we have our fortune tokens. I've got them here in my Uber tray here. The fortunes are abilities to kind of re-roll your dice. Galleons are what you're going to use to purchase cards. Over off to the left over here, we have a whole bunch of cards as well. So much that we couldn't even fit it all on the camera at the same time. But we have 8 different items that are always available to you. Then we have our encounter decks. We have the outside ring, then we have the middle ring, and we have some spells as well. Spells are special abilities that you can use throughout the game. We have our Deathly Hallows that we're going to need, and we have our ferrets that we might have to turn into if we get transfigured or anything like that. On our turn, we're going to roll one of the dice. We got a 2, and we can choose whether we want to go left or right. So Hagrid has a choice here of going 1-2 over there to Gringotts Bank, or 1-2 to the London streets. Let's go 1-2. This says draw an encounter card. You're going to draw the encounter card that's appropriate for whether you're in the inner ring, or the outer ring, or the inner ring. There's a whole bunch of things you might come across. All right, so for instance, you have observers. Observers basically just sit on the board. So we've got Snape here. He's going to sit on the board, and he's going to, every time you land on where he is, you have to roll a die, and additional things might happen, in addition to what happens to the spot on the board. Then we've got enemies. Like here we've got a basilisk. You've got a basilisk. He wants to battle with might. He's got a might of 4, so you have to beat that in order to win. But if you do beat him, you're going to be able to use him as a trophy, which you're able to use to kind of up your stats a little bit. And of course, there's different special abilities that are on there as well. Then you have followers, but of course there's 2 different followers because in this game you have 2 factions. You have both the Death Eaters and you have the Order of the Phoenix. So you've got here a follower of the Order of the Phoenix and you have a follower of the Death Eaters. But when you have a follower, it allows you to kind of up your stats. But when you are the opposite side of this particular character, like for instance, if we are a Death Eater going up against a follower of the Order of the Phoenix, they are an enemy to us. In that case, you fight them like normal, using the stats they have there at the bottom. In which case, Luna Lovegood, she has a magic of 3 that we're going to have to fight with. Or Quirrell, he's got a magic of 3 as well. So those are the things that we're going to have to fight. We also might come across some event cards. This is being attacked by spiders. It says flip the advantage token to the other side. So we've got an advantage token here on the board. Basically, it's going to flip over constantly. Every time you have to flip to draw one of those encounter cards, you're going to flip this over. Basically, it's saying if there's going to be a +1 to the side of the attack rolls of whichever side has that advantage currently. It's going to flip over constantly, back and forth, and also some of the cards, such as that event card that we talked about, is going to tell it to flip over again. So it's going to be constantly shifting back and forth of who has the advantage that round. You might also come across some items here. This one says, this is the Marauders Map. It's a magical object. Adds 2 to your magic when you're holding it, which is huge. You've also got things like the Deathly Hallows that you might come across. These are good for a lot of reasons, but really the main reason why this is good is you want to be able to get into the center board, the Great Hall, and fight Voldemort. And you cannot go into that center ring unless you have one of those Deathly Hallows. Alright, then we have other things like places. These are similar to like those observer cards. It is placed right where it was found for the rest of the game. And whenever you come across it, you have to do whatever it says. In this case, roll a die, and you might either gain life, lose life, all kinds of different stuff that might happen as a result of this place. As a reminder, here on the board, it also kind of shows you the green footsteps versus the purple footsteps. That reminds you kind of which deck to draw from, whether in the inner ring or the outer ring. Other symbology you might see, it might say, like here it says, roll a die. There's really, really, really small text there you have to kind of zoom in on to read, but it's going to tell you in that small text what's going to happen based off what result you get on the dice. You're going to be able to gain some fortune and some galleons as you roam around the board. You might gain some spells as well. Spells are different things that you can use. You cannot use spells unless your magic's at a certain level. So starting out the game, you do not have these to be able to use. So we have things like Obliviate. Obliviate allows you to hurt other characters. Confundus allows you to roll a dice and see what the result is. Same things as usual. Might gain some magic, might gain some life. You might lose some money. Who knows? This one says use at the start of your turn. You're able to look at the top cards of the deck, top 5 cards of the deck, and kind of see what you might encounter before you select which way you're going to go, left or right. You can only have 3 followers at a time, so if you ever have more followers than that, you might have to get rid of some. Also, you can only ever hold 4 of the objects at a time. However, we do have one of the objects over here that you can purchase at some of the spots, called the Beaded Bag. It by itself can hold 4 objects, so you can hold it, holding 4 objects, plus 3 other objects as well, which can really kind of help you out. You're going to be doing a lot of battling. So for instance, when you battle an enemy, you're going to have to roll dice, compare your stats, both that you already have, plus the dice rolls, in order to see who wins. Also, when someone of different factions, like for instance, we have Peter Pettigrew here, on the side of the Death Eaters, who's ever on the same spot as Hagrid, who is a member of the Order of the Phoenix, they're going to battle as well using their stats. Whenever you lose a battle, you're going to have to lose a life. You also might have to determine other things based off what the card says. You might lose other things as well, be moved around the board, that kind of thing. As you're rolling around the board, if you ever roll a 1, basically Voldemort is going to move as well. So what you're going to do is you're going to roll another die to see how many spots Voldemort's going to move. And he has the opportunity, as your first move of every round, to go to a different section. So for instance, if you rolled a 3, you could go 1, 2, 3. The next time he moves, someone else could make him go, let's say you rolled a 4. The first one could be used to get him out of that intersection. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So now he's in that middle ring where he might attack us. Voldemort kind of has his own stats based off of where he is. So he has might and magic. They're always equal. But if he's in the outer ring, he's at 7. The inner ring, it's 9. On the middle-ish ring, the very center of the board, he's at 10. And the very, very, very center spot of the board, the Great Hall, that is where he has 12 and 12. 12 magic, and you have to beat him with magic in the Great Hall in order to win the game. The idea is that as a member of the Order of the Phoenix, you need to defeat him in order to win the battle against the bad guys, and you have to beat him in the Great Hall in order to do that. If you are a member of the Death Eaters, same thing, you need to get to that middle of the board where he is in the Great Hall, and you need to defeat him that way as well in order to show that you are worthy of being on his team. So either way, you need to defeat him in the middle of the board. Once you get into that middle ring, you basically have kind of these walls that you cannot go through. You have to kind of go around in a circle to get to that Great Hall. Each one of those rooms makes you roll a dice, and they all make you kind of do bad things. For one thing, you go slower. Normally, you just roll the dice, and whatever the value is, you move that many spots. This time, however, you roll just one die, and you cut its value in half. So, for instance, if you rolled a 6, you're only moving 3 spots. And each one of those spots in that room is a bad thing from someone. Maybe it says, if you're in Order of the Phoenix, lose a life. Maybe if you are, you roll a dice and you lose that many, amounts of objects or whatever. So each one of those spots is going to tell you new instructions, almost always bad things for you, before you finally get to the Great Hall and you battle Voldemort himself. The first person who can successfully defeat Voldemort is declared the winner.
One of the fun things about raising children on Harry Potter is hearing your 4-year-old go, right you are, Harry Potter! Like that just all the time when it's not even relevant. It's absolutely hilarious. Okay, so to the game. I actually thought it was really cool on the board to see all these places that are in the Wizarding World. So the outside edge, that's all it is places in the Wizarding World. The Burrow or Diagon Alley, just things that are part of the books but aren't necessarily like Hogwarts, right? And then in the inner circle, you have all the Hogwarts grounds and all the things that associate with that. And then on the inner circle or square, you have classrooms and stuff like that. So I like how it kind of built up to going into Hogwarts school, especially where the final battle in the Great Hall and the final battle and this is the Great Hall. So I liked thematically how that made sense.
And then also, kind of matched up perfectly with how difficult it was. On that outer ring, it was very easy. You basically just landed on a spot, and you might grab some stuff. You're trying to kind of build up your stats. But you couldn't get into that secondary ring until you had built up your stats to a certain point. And because it was harder and harder to do things on that second track. And then, if you wanted to get into Hogwarts itself, then in the very center part of the board, you had to really make sure your stats were on point. You wanted to build up to that point, so that way you could go through this gauntlet, essentially, of Hogwarts, eventually getting to the Great Hall and being able to defeat Voldemort. So you had to really kind of build your character up as you kind of went through the board as well.
The component quality was really good, too. They had these score or stat trackers, and I always look for simple things like if somebody hits the table or something moves, is it going to move? And it doesn't. So it actually is pretty good at staying in place, and the board is pretty thick. Everything was just decent. It was really good component quality.
I will say, for me at least, this board was very busy. So on an individual action, if you basically kind of look down at the board, you see what your choices are. You're going to go either left or you're going to go right. And it is not nearly as convoluted. But just from a top-down view of the whole board, it's very busy. Yeah. It's hard to see everything from where you're sitting. It's hard to kind of know what to expect, where to go. It's hard to plan because it's just all you see is just kind of like shapes and colors. There's not like every inch of this board is used in some way for some location, and it just makes it very hard to kind of see it all.
Well, there's a lot of text on the board, too. So sometimes there's something that will happen on the complete opposite end of where you are, and you see the die icon, but you don't know anything else. Like, you're going to roll something, but you have no idea what's going to happen, and so you are reliant on the person on the other side to tell you everything that is going to happen, and vice versa. If they're over on where you are, all the text, you have to read it to them, and sometimes there's cards that are played in certain locations, and then you have to read everything that happens, whereas, in a lot of games there's a lot of text, but it's usually something that you have, and it's not something that you have to continually read to the other players.
Yeah, and this is a little bit of a grind. I mean, this is, it takes a long time to get through this game. It's not what I would call streamlined, I would say. You are, little by little, it might take you a long time to build up your stats enough to where you are getting into that secondary ring like we talked about. It might take you 45 minutes or an hour just to get into that secondary ring. So, I mean, you are really kind of grinding through. You're having to take advantage of every good die roll you have, take advantage of every enemy that you can defeat. But even a bad roll might make you lose stats, and you're back to where you were 20 minutes ago. So for that reason, there's some frustrating parts of this game. I will say it's cleaned up a little bit from what the original Talisman was, made it a little bit easier, a little bit faster, but still, this is what I would call a grind of a game, having to do the same thing over and over again to get those stats you need.
Yeah. Yeesh. Okay, so overall, for me, it just kind of lacked the fun factor. Like, in every game, there needs to be a fun factor. And for me personally, as a gamer, I didn't feel like this game had the fun factor for me. However, hear me out, okay? Even though this game wasn't for me, I can definitely see who this is for. Like, our daughter would love this. Absolutely love this. She would love seeing all of that stuff. She would love just a simple roll and move of it. And being able to play a game that feels really, really heavy when it's not. It just takes a little bit of time to play. And I feel like there are people out there who love the Wizarding World who would totally dig this game because they want a long game but not a lot of step-by-step strategy. You don't have to think 5, 10, 6 turns ahead. You just want to build up your stats so you can go up, and that's basically it. And I feel like that there is people out there for this game because of that.
I like how your progression went 5, 10, 6. 6 turns ahead. Yeah, I 100% agree. This is a game that I can definitely see some people who would just love Harry Potter, which we do, and some people who maybe aren't necessarily really involved with the gaming hobby as it is right now, being able to have a great night of this, really enjoying immersing themselves in the Wizarding World, talking about it for 2 hours, and kind of moving around this board, not having to think super far ahead in the future and be able to just have a great time. But there's a lot of people who are going to see this is dated, right? This is based off of Talisman, and Talisman is a dated game. It's got things like lose a turn. It's got things like roll and move as a mechanism. It's got things like that slow grind that's not very streamlined. That doesn't mean it's not fun for everyone. It's just not fun for maybe someone who is, like, who has seen a lot of games and maybe has been indoctrinated into the more modern mechanisms. So for that reason, it was kind of a pass for me. This is still a game that I will play with my daughter because she just loves that Wizarding World.
Yeah.
I'm not saying this is for kids. I'm not saying that. This is not a kid's game. This is a for anybody game. It's just that this is where she's at. She loves playing those games.
But if your 10-year-old loves Harry Potter and just wants to do something for a chunk of time, right?
This is a great way to do it.
Yes. This is a great way to do it. Everybody, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe so you can see our videos every Monday and Wednesday and every other Friday. Until then, you can find us on Facebook, we're Ryan Bethany Board Game Reviews. On Twitter, we're Ryan Bethany 1. And on Instagram, we are Ryan and Bethany.
You guys, thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.
Bye.